You know, finally the polls got it right and we are seeing this sigh of relief across the markets.
Yeah, we certainly are. You need to remember, Heidi, of course, that this is an extraordinary feat for Emmanuel Macron. Little less than 3 years ago, he was virtually unknown to the French public when he was picked essentially from behind the scenes of the French presidential palace by the French president François Hollande to become economy minister, a post that he held from August 2014 until August of last year. So just over 2 years' time. Since then, his popularity has risen and risen. And now this evening he was elected French president with around about 90% of the votes counted. He's got 64.3%. So this is quite a resounding victory for Emmanuel Macron against Marine Le Pen, who so far is at 35.7%.
And Markus, you know, I think the big question on a lot of people's minds is, you know, after seeing Brexit, after seeing Trump elected, is this sort of the, you know, the end of the populist movement, at least in Europe?
Well, I would say that definitely the National Front Party is probably disappointed this evening, because the leadership of the National Front, they were saying that a good score for them would be around about 40% or so of the vote for Marine Le Pen. They didn't get so, and they didn't get so by quite. They didn't get that vote or that result by quite a wide margin. So, as I say, this is most likely a disappointment for the National Front. That being said, Marine Le Pen is on course to get around 11 million votes or so in France. That's something that a few years ago the National Front could only dream about, that kind of result. So they have made progress. They've made clear progress, and they are hoping that this is going to a certain extent, open the floodgates for the next presidential election, which is coming up in 5 years in 2022. And certainly they're also looking ahead to the legislative election, which is coming up in June, on June the 11th and then on June 18th. So that too in 2 rounds. The National Front leader Marine Le Pen made it clear in her concession speech this evening that she would be around to fight that election and that she would be around to hold Emmanuel Macron's feet to the fire.
Right. So, I mean, certainly that 11 million votes is nothing to sneeze at by any means, Markus. What about for the ECB, though? Does this give, you know, the ECB at least an all clear when it comes to political risk in Europe?
I wouldn't say that it gives it an all clear. You need to remember that we do have those legislative elections here in France coming up. We also have the vote in Germany coming up in September, the national election there. Will Angela Merkel get another term in power as Chancellor in Germany? That's a big question for the European Union, of course, and for the Euro. Then we have the Italian elections and then perhaps another Greek election. So there's plenty of political risk to come up after this presidential election. That being said, of course, I would probably say that the leadership around EU countries this evening, they're probably drawing a sigh of relief, because this does remove an existential threat for the euro. For instance, Marine Le Pen, she had pledged to pull France out of the euro area were she to become victorious. That didn't happen. So as I say, we're probably seeing the European leadership drawing a sigh of relief this evening.
Markus, the president-elect inherits, you know, in a lot of ways, a deeply divided France. It's been really traumatized by these waves of terrorist attacks. There's economic issues as well. I mean, in terms of what he faces next, is it a bit of an uphill battle? How well is En Marche expected to do in the next round of parliamentary elections?
Well, I would say that it all hinges kind of on these legislative elections on the 11th and the 18th of June, as I say. Without a parliamentary majority in the National Assembly, Macron would definitely be facing an uphill battle. That being said, the latest opinion polls actually are going in En Marche's way. That is Emmanuel Macron's political movement, which sort of roughly translates to On the Move. According to opinion polls from last week, they would get anywhere between 240 and 260 seats in the National Assembly in those legislative elections. They need around about 290 in order to get a majority, so they're not quite there yet. But for a political movement that is just run about a year old, that is quite an extraordinary feat to get that many votes and to get that many seats. So we'll have to wait for those legislative elections. Things are looking better than they certainly did for Emmanuel Macron when it comes to the legislative elections run about a month ago, but he would still probably have to cobble together some sort of coalition, which would mean that he would either have to lean on more moderate right-wing MPs or perhaps left-wing MPs from the Socialist Party.